This is not a function of age. This is a function of, how have I consciously and intentionally chosen my path? If I've never allowed my path to take me somewhere where I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, where I felt like a beginner, where I felt like I was potentially out of my depth, then I will quickly feel in danger when I'm in situations where I'm merely uncomfortable.
Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today, I have the great pleasure of having with me Jillian Reilly. Jillian Reilly is a founder, writer, keynote speaker, and consultant. Jillian has spent her 30-year career working in social, organizational, and individual change across Africa, Asia, and Central Europe. Her focus is on helping people unlock their ability to navigate change and accelerate growth and learning. Jillian's upcoming book, The 10 Permissions, guides readers in permitting themselves to design lives that fully leverage the possibilities of the disruptive world that we live in. Jillian, you're joining us. You're joining me from South Africa. This is a very long distance call. I'm super happy that you're able to take some time today to be with me. I think the work that you're doing, the book that you're going to be publishing, is going to be of interest very much to the audience of Beyond the Thesis. Who, and like we discussed a little bit before turning on, hitting record, who are most of them going to somehow transition from different professional reality, which is academia, graduate school, to what comes after, be it postdoc if you're out of graduate school, or even being directly moving outside of academia, which is even a bigger shift. And as you know, because of all your work, big shifts have challenges. But you've been working at how to navigate this, and this is why I'm super happy to have you here. But I'll let you, I'll let you maybe paint a little bit of a wider picture of who you are, of who Jillian Reilly is, because the intro is very short and condensed. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, maybe about transitions that you have gone through, and how you came to be interested in this, in this question of growth, learning, and helping people maximize that for themselves?
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. First of all, your audience is one that I can say I think I hold it close to my heart, because I know what it's like to be leaving, an academic setting, an institutional setting, where on some level you sort of feel like you're preparing for the next step, right? And yet I think right now in this world, that sort of easy transition into the next step doesn't feel so easy anymore. I think university education, at whatever stage you're in, it doesn't necessarily feel like the professional preparation that it used to, and that, I'll just take this and I'll go out into the world of work and I'll apply it, in ways that perhaps feel very obvious to me. I think now there are both positives and negatives. There's tremendous opportunity, I think, now for people to have ever greater choice of how they want to apply their capabilities. But there's a lot of choices that we have to make as individuals. So I hope that this conversation can contribute to their thinking about that. As we referenced a little bit before we got on, I remember very well the last transition I made from academia into the real world, from, school into work, if you will. And, I made a very bold decision to step off of the path that appeared most obvious. I was at Northwestern University in Chicago, kind of prepared to go to law school, and something in me said, I think I want something else. I think I want to go out into the world and kind of figure out how I can contribute meaningfully to its growth and its change. And at that time, South Africa was going through a tremendous social transition, since this is a conversation about transitions. It was going to hold its first democratic elections in 1994, and most of your listeners probably won't even have been alive then, but it was the elections that brought Nelson Mandela into power, if people know who that name is. And I wanted to be there. So I Took a very big decision to try and get myself to South Africa. Disappointing a lot of people, confusing many others, but I had a very deep feeling that there was something that I wanted to go out into the world and explore. And what was meant to be a sort of 6 month time to be here for the elections obviously turned into something much more, and a career in social transitions, in organizational transitions, individual ones. And that's really the root of so much of my work, and really the root of the 10 permissions as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's I find it interesting that you mentioned surprising some people and disappointing some
Yeah.
people. And this is, and I've lived through this, and I know people live through this every day who decide to somehow leave a path that is, let's say, well known or well appreciated in society, and let's say doing a
Mm-hmm.
PhD, and say, you know what, this is not working for me, and I'm quitting the PhD. That's one outcome, but another outcome that's also, and I've had, guests telling me about how even in their couple, deciding to, let's say, leave academia after getting this degree. There was some explaining to do, and surprise and disappointment are two. Surprise, well, it could be good, could be bad, but it's the disappointment. So telling your entourage, your family, look, I was going for this, which you all approved of, and which you probably envisioned me getting this degree and then eventually becoming a professor, whatever. But now I'm doing this thing, and I'm seeing where it leads better than I did at the beginning. And now I know that this path is not for me. And a lot of people have to deal with this surprise and disappointment from their close ones. And then I know that some of them end up not allowing yourself, not permitting
That's right.
themselves. So we're talking about the 10
That's right.
permissions, not permitting themselves to do the thing their heart is telling them to do in a
Yeah.
way. So I wonder whether this is maybe a good starting point for this conversation about the 10 permissions,
Mm.
which is, the how to navigate like these difficult discussions or difficult disclosures about maybe controversial for others, right?
Mm.
For you, why you took the
Mm.
decision, but for others, it might seem controversial. Does this resonate with you? This is something
Oh, yeah.
you.
I mean, I literally can still feel the conversations around the dinner table, and looking into my father's eyes, and, you know, um, and the reality is, in many of those moments, you will not have words that will satisfy anybody in the room, right? You can't make a case that they're going to go, "Oh, bravo, this is amazing. Well done. I'm so glad you've made, what I describe as a novel decision." So it's new. It's new for you. It's new for them. It's unfamiliar. It's untested. It's unexpected. So, in those moments, you can't go into those conversations thinking that anybody around the table is going to stand up and applaud. They won't. They won't. They'll probably be surprised. They might be concerned. The people who are closest to you are the ones who probably have the most vested interest in the current version of you. You are what they know. You are all they've known up until now, and they are trying to keep track of the emerging version of you. So when you start to, reveal a version of you that is unfamiliar to them, they're going to go, "Wait, what?" And, in my experience, you rarely have an answer for them that makes them go, "Oh, okay, I get it." You know, you'll probably have at least one, probably two, in my case, many conversations that are just like, "I just don't get it. I don't understand this." And, I tried to kind of frame it in ways that I thought would be satisfying to them. Oh, this will be great for my CV and this and that and the other. And they weren't buying it. Of course they weren't. They knew that I was doing something that was, really, really unique and unexpected. So I think there's two things that are really important to remember in those moments. And it's things that I say in the book, which is that, approval, even of the people who love you the most and who you love the most, is desirable, but it's not a requirement. It is not a requirement for action. And once you realize that that person who loves you can sit across the table from you and look at you like a stranger, it's very hard. But what happens in those moments when you feel like nobody else knows you is when you're actually getting to know yourself. Because in order to go through that and to walk away from the conversation and be like, "Whew, okay, that was rough." But somehow it's a bit like burnishing that sense of, well, this is what I want, so now I'm going to keep going. And you begin to develop what I call a discomfort tolerance, which is a superpower because your ability to have uncomfortable conversations with people is your ability to bring out your best contributions to the world. Um, and you start to discern what I call discomfort from danger. So, you're okay. You are okay. It's not a desirable situation in your mind's eye, but actually once you've come through it, you realize that, okay, I have the ability to come further into myself and stand in my choices, back my own authority, be my own permission giver. And every single adult needs to be that. And kind of the point of the book is that every single adult needs to be that more than ever. Because the idea
Mm.
that anybody under the age of 25 is going to step out into the world and walk a linear and familiar path, I think is seriously outdated. So you are going to be
Yeah.
making choices that people around you might go, I don't get it. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? So for me, that ability to have those uncomfortable conversations, to start to get more comfortable being your own best authority, is like a muscle. And the more you do it, the more you realize that you are safe, you are okay, um, and you have an ability to make your way through things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Part of what I talk about in the book is that I've worked with people across the world who were actually in danger for the novel choices that they were making, for being the first in their family to do something or the last in their family to do something. I mean, they actually faced physical, um, response from their loved ones who were very angry that they were breaking with tradition or defying expectation. For most of us, that's not the case. And so it's really important to start to kind of wade into that because once you do that, you start to develop a capability to navigate a path that's much, much truer to you than the one that you think somebody else wants you to have.
Hmm. Yeah, this makes total sense, and it is so. There's a coming of age type of
Yeah.
thing, a theme undercurrent there in what you're
Yes.
saying, and it might seem funny in a certain way or odd
Mm.
to be talking about coming of age to people who have are finishing, let's say, their PhD and they're 20 something, maybe 30. But it's not coming of age in terms of biological age, but in terms of being, like you said, being able to stand in on your own two
Mm.
feet. And I really liked the discernment you made between, like, discerning the distinction between discerning or feeling danger
Hmm.
versus
Yes.
discomfort. And because danger, well, we are biologically
Mm.
programmed to respond to it in a certain
Yeah.
way. Discomfort is kind of the ground for growth,
Yes.
or it can be the ground for
It is.
growth.
It
But
is.
when you're not trained to discern them, you're seeing danger where there's discomfort, and then it'll stunt your growth in a certain way. Anyway, that's the way I'm kind of interpreting what
I
you're
think
saying.
you read my book, David. Have you gotten advance copy on my book? So, one of the things that I see with a lot of young people right now, because they're heading out into a world and dealing with the discomfort of not knowing, the discomfort of the end of, what I call the end of predictable progress. So they are stepping out and they're looking around at a world where it's like, okay, I can't just slot into a pre-made role and hold on to that for the rest of my life as my career strategy. Like institutional advancement, and I don't know about academia, but I think this is even true there. Institutional advancement, linear, seamless institutional advancement is no longer a career strategy, like it was for my father, where it was just stay there and hold on. And in that space, you're comfortable. You feel in control of the variables, you're familiar with your surroundings. So a lot of people have in their mind's eye that that's what it's supposed to look like, that that's what good looks like. And a lot of people have reached a certain point in their lives, particularly if I may say, if they have been in academia for a very long time, where they've been held by an institution, telling them what to do, telling them, what the next step is. And then all of a sudden you've got to get out into a world and navigate where the next step is your choice to make. So, as you say, this is not a function of age. This is a function of, how have I consciously and intentionally chosen my path? If I've never allowed my path to take me somewhere where I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, where I felt like a beginner, where I felt like I was potentially out of my depth, then I will quickly feel in danger when I'm in situations where I'm merely uncomfortable. So, I think a lot of this for me, in a world that is throwing so much at us, that is requiring us to make so many new choices and unfamiliar choices, that raising of discomfort tolerance is like a practice. I almost think of it as like a fitness sort of thing. It's like being fit for this world. Like it's literally, like can you allow yourself to be in places and in situations where you're like, whew, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure what the outcome is going to be. Was this the right decision? Where there's a degree of uncertainty, and you're able to hold that for a while before you flee, thinking that this is too dangerous, I can't be here. Um, because I'm afraid most of us are going to have to make choices moving forward in the absence of certainty, in the absence of
Hmm.
predictability, in the absence of familiarity, even. And the more that we can do that, the more this what feels like a very chaotic world suddenly becomes full of possibility. It stops being
Yeah.
as scary, and it starts to be like, okay, cool, let me find my way to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. This totally resonates with me too, and yeah. Well, let's talk about, for example, the example of graduate
Mm.
school, which most of my listenership is in graduate school, is finishing or has just finished graduate school, just got their degree, but the what happens, and I'm sure this also happens, although it's a bit different, but it also happens like in institutional evolution of a career, which is they and I lived through that. There is this tunnel vision thing that happens, which is there's this degree at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
tunnel, and if you want to get it in good time, and if you want to also potentially like please your superiors, your supervisor, etc., you will tend to focus or tell yourself that I can only focus on this. This is my only objective and goal during these 4, 5, 6 years, whichever. And then where it kind of derails people, I think, is when it even starts eating at let's say people's hobbies, people's social life, etc. But let's not talk about that. Maybe let's talk about the aspect of like this monoculture of this is the only thing, this is the only seed I'm planting in my garden. I just want this thing. And what you're saying, I usually say it in a different way, but I think it connects. Which I usually tell them, look, okay, you're trying to get this degree in good time and publish well, etc. But it'll be beneficial to you to during those years have or dedicate time to also be an explorer of what's outside. and network with people who are outside academia, who are in the private, maybe people who did that transition. I met someone in one of my early interviews, and she said, "Oh, I used to have a job." She called it a scrapbook, where any job post, she wasn't looking, but any job posting she saw she liked, she would take it and create this kind of map of possibilities. And it looks like to me that there's a connection with what you're saying, which is because it's this exercise of, okay, let's picture ourselves in this uncomfortable situation and see what it could become, and see what possibilities are there. And I think that creates a balance between this like tunnel vision of just having all your eggs in the same basket, versus balancing it with something else that allows you to grow in your kind of inner map of possibilities.
Yes, beautifully stated. Absolutely. So I think that monoculture, which I love that phrasing, the deep, narrow, singular focus on achieving a thing, which was then meant to be a portal to the next thing, I do believe is dangerous right now, as you've just described. A line that I use in the book is, what used to be a lifeline is now a tightrope. So the idea was, I'll just hold on to that. I'll just hold on to that. I'll be fine. Now it's like, whew, if anything happens in my field, if something shifts, I got nothing else. So I think we've gone from that deep and narrow and just grab that PhD because once I have it, I'm set. There are no guarantees anymore, right? We've moved from what I describe as an if-then world, where if I get my PhD, then I'm set for life. And I'm not saying that's what people think, but a broad narrative would.
It used to be.
Okay, that this is my golden ticket. This is my thing. I'm now set. I'm secure. It's a sort of from if then to what if, okay, which recognizes that there are no guarantees. There are no equations anymore. It's all an experiment. So you've invested a huge amount of time in this experiment, in getting this thing. And I would 100% agree with you that you have to treat that period as a time of, in my mind, creating a much broader portfolio of capabilities and experiences and knowledge than a single thing. Because you want to, as you've described, have a variety of things to pull from. And I think the idea that it won't necessarily all come, have your studies, do your thing. But as you say, there's a huge range of ways to supplement and round that out to allow you to explore, to allow you to come out of this experience feeling that much more capable of adapting to a variety of different situations. And that's the key right now. And the whole point of the 10 permissions is, how do we create the most adaptive, responsive life path that evolves alongside an evolving world? And to do that, you need diversification. You need a mindset where, you're able to pivot. You're able to go out and say, okay, I know how to do this, but I could apply it in these 3 different ways. I love the map of possibilities pulled out of scrapbooking. I call it treasure hunting. You're just collecting things that you think could be useful for you. And it's intentional, right? If you pour all of your energy into getting this one thing, and then you walk out and go, okay, I'm only equipped to do this. And if anything happens, then I feel deeply in danger. Well, you haven't prepared for this world. To me, you're living in the past then. So you will have a very, very valuable set of experiences and knowledge coming out of this experience. But that needs to be with, super clear eyes around, how am I going to walk into this world feeling as capable as possible of navigating whatever comes at me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Yeah, if you are listening and you're curious about what episode I was talking about, it's the episode with Fiona Robinson, and that's where she talks about this scrapbooking, and it's interesting. Finding treasures is, of course, a way to put it. Now, Jillian, and I'm calling you Jillian.
Yes,
I There was a question for the beginning that I was going to ask you Jill or Jillian, and I never
that's
did.
okay.
But
Jillian works, as does Jill, but
Jillian
let's
is
go
fine.
with Jillian.
Very good, Jillian. So I was going to say, so we have talked about allowing yourself and giving yourself a system to imagine possibilities.
Hmm.
And before even that, we talked about allowing yourself to decide, irrespective of external pressures or expectations, etc. And but the book is the 10 permissions. So now maybe I'm going to let you from this that we talked. Maybe share a little bit more about other aspects that I may I may not that I may not have that we haven't covered yet, that are part of the book, that are part of the system, and maybe kind of a technique, an approach to diffuse maybe these like thought patterns that keep people stuck in this. Oh, I'm afraid of making this move. I'm afraid of even talking about this possibility because of the reactions of people around me. Because maybe it'll start me thinking more, and kind of it'll kind of veer me into this, exit of the of the highway, more than I kind of that I feel brave enough to do
Mm,
on my own right
yeah.
now. And yeah, so any practices or exercises, I'm just gonna give you free reign to take the conversation to something more related to the content of
Hmm.
the book, and that applies to our audience.
Yeah. So the 10 permissions are sort of 10 very deliberate ways that I'm trying to kind of provoke a fresh way of thinking about how to navigate adult life. Really sort of flipping the script, if you will, on a lot of what we've been either told directly or conditioned to believe was the best way to move through our adult lives because it worked. It worked in the 20th century, it worked before, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't deliver on the rewards
Mm.
that it once did. So each one of them is a sort of different way of thinking about what you're allowed to do, how you're allowed to navigate, how you're allowed to show up. I'll give a couple of examples. The first one is be willful. So, we are taught from a very early age, to use my words, to kind of outsource our will to everybody around us. And that's exactly what we're talking about here in terms of satisfying other people. Um, I work with people who are 50 years old. Again, speaking of maturity, who struggle very much to tap into their own will, to their own want, because they've always performed based on a set of external expectations and external wants. So my point here is that in a world of endless choice and lots of options and responsibilities, we need ever more to kind of tap into that want. That your will is no longer a liability. It's a necessity to find your way through a complex world. And when you talk about practices there, so a lot of times, what do you want? And it escalates up to big questions. What do you want to do after you finish your PhD? We ask young kids and we ask teens, what do you want to be? What do you want to study? It's all of these big questions that feel hugely consequential. And I like to tell people who've spent very little time exercising their want to start really, really small. To start on the weekends. I mean, you mentioned leisure and hobbies earlier in terms of things that get sort of edged out of people's lives. Um, to really start with things that you want that are low consequence. Because again, if we see it as a practice of building a capability, building a kind of muscle to listen to your own desires and act on them, then that feels much, much easier when it's done with things that aren't going to, create the waves that we worry about the big stuff will. And a lot of people think that it doesn't matter, but I've worked with people who can't decide what they want to eat for lunch, much less what they want to do after they finish their PhD. They have no agency. And so build that in small ways. Start with, little micro experiments in exercising will and want around what do I really want to do this morning? Do I really want to, go to my gym class this morning, or am I operating on autopilot? So starting to kind of tune into your own autopilot mode where you're doing things you think you should do instead of things you actually want to do, and then starting to disrupt that in sort of micro ways, for me, is a great way of kind of repatterning. Because I spent my whole life working with people who waited until everything was almost intolerable before they tried to exercise their want. And at that stage, they had no lived experience of doing it. They had no muscle memory, if you will. So it's impossible. So build out that listening into your desires and then learning to articulate them to people. So, again, people who you say, well, what do you want? I don't know. What do you want? They're very afraid of what somebody's going to think of them if they articulate their wants. So start small, start with things that aren't going to cause a major hassle. And the second permission is go astray. So, as part of that, you can learn to sort of deviate a little bit from whatever feels like your tunnel path that you mentioned earlier. And those tunnel paths dominate, our daily lives as well as our careers. People who are just kind of sleepwalking through their days. That's a great place to learn to kind of disrupt that narrow vision. It's not easy for people who've been on that path for a long time to start to imagine turning off of it. So my advice is start with your days, not your years. Start messing around with how you live in small ways before you start, sitting down and saying, I think, I'm gonna quit my PhD, or I'm gonna, leave academia, or whatever it is. Really work within the existing confines of your life and build up some of this self-awareness, this intentional decision making in ways that, you're comfortable with, so that when it comes time to do some of those uncomfortable things, you have a little bit more lived experience doing it. And all of the 10 permissions are about setting out into the world and building that sort of adaptivity, that exploratory capability to evolve alongside an evolving world, and to do it in a way that
Mhm.
feels more relevant for today. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, let me stop there.
No, it makes sense. First thing that came to mind is that the first exercise that you mentioned, to try and ask yourself in the small elements of your day, can I decide something different today, or what do I really want? I don't know if you're familiar with the notion of lucid dreaming.
Yes.
But so yeah, and it makes me think of that,
Okay.
because I remember my sister at a certain point wanted to do it, or was interested in doing it, and she said the thing you need to do is during the day ask yourself multiple times, am I
Yeah.
awake? No, or am I dreaming? Something like that. And then it meant that when dreaming, when once she created that habit, when dreaming she would ask herself, and then would be able to
Okay.
lucid
Oh,
dream. I never did
fascinating.
it myself, but it's really interesting. I think there's a nice parallel
Mm,
there to make, because following a kind of a pre-written path is kind of dreaming in a way,
mm,
and doing and inserting these interruptions or these interferences to see if I can change the path somehow. Anyway, it really felt like there was a commonality there.
yeah. No, I
Um,
get that.
the, yeah, the other. So that was just a comment. But what I think is interesting in what you're saying, and where also the challenge may be for a lot of people, because a lot of people like me travel from the place where they have their family, their group of friends, their social network, to another country to do these
Mm,
graduate degrees, a country where they have they're alone, they have
mm,
no one, they have the supervisor who's kind of a very authoritative,
sure.
and hierarchically high
Yeah.
person, high rung person in their life, and depending on where they come from, the culture, their upbringing, just this rapport to authority already poses a bunch of
Of course.
challenges, and whatever comes out of the mouth of this authority person is kind of has higher priority than your little
Hmm.
wants, or your personal, and I think what's interesting, and maybe you can reflect on that, or maybe even you have an example, or of people you've worked with. But I think what you're saying can apply to that also, which is, okay, I'm in this exercise. I'm a student underneath a supervisor, but I am still a full and complete person, and I still have an agency, like
Yes,
you were saying before.
yes,
So it's kind of a self convincing or self hypnosis, just to bring you back to, okay, there is this very stereotyped relationship between me and my supervisor. It doesn't mean I cannot take small, medium, or large decisions in my life, because I'm still the person. I'm still the driver of this chariot that is me.
yeah. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm the driver of the chariot that is me. Yes. A couple of things. First of all, I know what it's like to leave my country at a young age and go somewhere else.
Of
And I
course.
would like, to encourage anybody who's done that to realize that you are in a wonderland of exploration when you have left that system that told you who you were supposed to be. So take advantage of that. I felt genuinely, deeply, I'm going to use a word I'm not thrilled with, but empowered to kind of invent myself on a daily basis through every conversation that I turned up to, through every choice I made to put myself into a new situation that back home I never would have been allowed to do. I mean, I came to South Africa and did voter education in prisons. I had never stepped foot in a prison in the United States, and I never would have. But the minute that I'd stepped out of that script of, Midwestern American good girl into kind of, hey, I'm now global citizen, whatever. I got choices to make, so make them. If this relationship with the supervisor is all consuming, then what I would really advise people to do is intentionally cultivate relationships that are more where you are able to show up with more agency, right? Because when you have things to counterbalance that relationship, I'm going to use one of my permissions, which is take it outside. So, whatever situation you're in, intentionally decide to explore beyond that. Because no matter what it is, if you are head down in a place, you begin to believe that that is your only reality. That is the only reality. And the more that you step out of that, you go, oh, wait a second. Okay, gosh, there's other people out here. He or she is not, the god or goddess of the world. Let me cultivate my sense of who I am in a variety of different settings, so that when I come back to this person, I am reminded that I am a fully fledged adult. We are in a professional relationship, because it is. This is not a parent, this is a professional advisor. And my job is to cultivate the most, beneficial relationship I can with this person. It is hard to do that with people who have entrenched positional authority in your life. So go out and find ways to create other types of relationships in your life that, reinforce that sense of agency that you might have about yourself. Don't hide away in your room and then, make this everything to you. Because within that space, you will not find the kind of capability, the agency, the will to do what you might want to do. One of my other permissions is experiment. So small things where you might, try to just stretch out your reference points beyond the course, the advisor, the PhD, where, you try, maybe a joining a community where you will expand your sort of horizons around who else is out there in the world, who's doing different things. Maybe there are areas that are adjacent to what you're doing where you can kind of play around with learning something different, trying something new. Again, breaking up what might start to feel like a very oppressive, routinized, or entrenched set of conditions in your life. And I think anything that any of us can do on a small basis to keep, you know, stretching out beyond these situations that can feel confining and restricting is hugely important.
So based on this, the reflection that comes up for me is then leaving a group that you were part of, let's say you used to do theater before getting into graduate school, leaving that for graduate school, or martial arts, which is what I did. And I stopped for a while and then I picked up and I really enjoyed picking it back up while I was in graduate school. So, but leaving these kinds of ecosystems that are really apart is a big mistake
Yes,
based on what you're
I would
saying.
think so. I mean, why I wouldn't, regardless of the nature of, even if I'm utterly thrilled with my advisor, even if my program is amazing, the simple reality is that I want to cultivate, curate, design the richest life possible. Because when, for a variety of reasons that are both, strategic in a complex world and simply about maintaining my own sense of capability and well-being. So there's, for me, a lot of the most profound learning and growth has happened beyond, what I would say on the edges of my life. It wasn't what I was being paid for. It wasn't what I thought was my primary focus in life. It was, for me, it was yoga. It was hiking and walking and being out in the world. And, they're not things that you necessarily, you can as a very ambitious or as a very studious adult feel like, oh no, that's, I'm not allowed to use my language. When in fact, those are the experiences that I think not only feed us and keep us rich and varied and interesting, and from that rich and varied and interesting place, we feel far more capable, right? Um, but I think
Yeah,
there are
yeah, yeah.
also spaces where we can very strategically kind of, build out that portfolio. It's not all going to
Yeah.
be about the thing that you're studying or the thing you think you're going to monetize later on. Um, we've been programmed to not focus on anything that we can't monetize because it's a waste of time. And it's like, not in this world, not anymore.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Well, one example. Well, there's again two. There's 2 points that come to mind. So, because I said leaving something that you did before, and that makes more sense for people who are, let's say, studying and doing graduate school close to where they were born. Someone who moves, then I would say make it a part of your plan to, yes, start your program, but also be part of one student society, or pick up something where you're going to meet other people. So it should be integrated in the graduate school experience,
Sure.
or else you're going to be sucked in by the by the black hole, by the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
The other thing, yeah, the other thing had to do with an example. One very good example of what you say was Adriana Bankston. I guess she's been on the show 2 times, and she did something with her colleagues when she was in graduate school that really like married like both worlds in the following way. They created a kind of a seminar club where they would invite alumni that were now outside of academia
Okay.
regularly. So now she was using her agency with her colleagues to do something probably not related and not fully approved by her PI because they were taking time off of their project. Anyway, that's the way usually, that's the rhetoric that's used
Yeah.
to do that. But she said she gained so much in terms of not just the networking, but the, okay, we can do things, we can create things, we can get money from the department to make this happen. And I think it's a great example of something that's even kind of safe in a way
Yeah.
because it's within the university walls, but it is, it is differentiated, and it allows growth, or it allowed growth for her. And so I think it's a good example there.
Yeah. I think any time that we act on that will that I talked about, I want, every single one of us knows that our best experiences, our most fulfilling experiences are, I want. I want to create a network. I want to create a network with alumni and da da. And once I've done that and I see it coming to life, well, that's satisfaction, right? That's a sense of, wow, okay. And within that, you realize that agency, that I can decide I want something and then I can act on it. It doesn't mean it's going to work out. It doesn't mean it's all going to be brilliant. But the process, the lived experience of pursuing that switches on a whole bunch of, capabilities and awarenesses that are like your lifeblood. So the idea that having gotten in to this institution, I can now sit back and be kind of brought along on the conveyor belt and do the things I'm only told to do, to then arrive at the end destination, to then get spat out into a world where at that point there's no conveyor belt, nobody's telling me what to do. And, I could possibly just sleepwalk into some role, but do I want to? And is for how long is that viable? Does anybody in this day and age think that, you know, any institution is going to protect us for the rest of our lives? I mean, I think that's one of the things that all of us are kind of collectively grieving right now, is the idea that if we find a safe role within an institution of some kind, we're set. And we all know that we can be laid off and replaced in a heartbeat. So I think once you start to kind of take your power back into yourself to say, okay, actually, I'm in this amazingly rich environment, because academic institutions are, where I have access to a whole bunch of really amazing people and resources and potential experiences. How am I going to use this time to grow a wide range of, again, networks, capabilities, experiences, skills that I believe not only will make me feel happy now and satisfied now, because that is obviously what we want, but in the process, I'm going to gain, a whole bunch of know-how that's going to be super useful for me when I leave here.
Yeah, no, for sure. And ideally also, meet people, because one of the other things that even has an effect, a negative effect, a deleterious effect on the mental health of people in graduate school and in academia, is especially like the PhD, which is the long haul. It's loneliness, being alone because of that tunnel vision, because of that misled impetus or reflex to just follow this one goal. People end up suffering for that. And there's numbers about the mental health issues, and I think if we follow what you propose, and if we do integrate in our day to day those moments of exploration, of getting a little bit in the discomfort zone, and to see, okay, how can I get comfortable in this unknown space? You're going to meet people, and you're not going to be so lonely, because I think it's an integral part of what we're saying is that we are humans, and this is a social thing. It's not an alone thing. It's not a solipsistic or solitary thing.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, David. And so, the book is obviously written for individuals, because I do think at the end of the day, that self management, that personal growth, it does come down to me making my own choices day in and day out. But as you pointed out, we exist as social animals. And the more that I am a part of bigger communities where I am reminded of the fact that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one doing this, that, there are people out there who can be everything from, companionship to inspiration to support. So one of the big things I'm doing with the 10 permissions is actually building out community, because when I started to talk about this and develop this content, particularly with younger people, one of the things that I kept hearing was this overwhelming pressure on everyone to figure it out on their own, and to try and both satisfy, what I call, satisfying yesterday's expectations, satisfying parental expectations or social expectations, but still try to sort of take advantage of present day possibilities, and feeling overwhelmed, torn, anxious. And it was kind of like everybody's in the same place. We're all finding our way. So we don't have to do it by ourselves. So building out of community for me is when this self permission becomes social permission, where I realize that, just you briefly referencing your story today of making unique choices that serve you reminds me that, all Right. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of people out there who are stepping off of a default path in big or small ways. And I already feel like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not alone. Maybe I'm not weird. Because that's the other thing I hear is, oh, I feel weird. My life doesn't look the way I thought it would. I'm not where my parents expect me to be. And I think we need to remind ourselves that our life stories are going to be different, and that's okay. In fact, it's better than okay. Like, I don't personally aspire to a boomer life story where I put on a suit and sleepwalk through my life. I don't want that. So if my life looks a little bit more disordered than that, well, fine. In that process, I'm exploring and discovering and learning and maybe able to access a sort of richness that I don't think was
Hmm.
available for previous generations.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense to me. It totally resonates with me, and I think it'll help the listeners out there who are in this maybe dilemma of trying to even understand what am I supposed to be, and maybe putting too much weight on the plate of expectations of me from
Yeah.
outside. And I think our conversation so far, and we're getting to the end of our conversation today, has really shown how important it is to keep or to maintain an idea that you are you're a full grown human being on your own, independently of those expectations, and you can you can permit yourself, and you should permit yourself to explore and make the best out of that, and of course considering different variables, but not putting too much weight on those external pressures, let's say.
Well, I think
um,
to treat them as data, right? They're data.
yeah,
They're not dir
data, that's
they're
very
not
good.
directions. Okay? They are.
That's very good. And for scientists, it's a great it's a great way to put
That's
it.
all they are. I mean, and they're data born of a very different. So your parents experienced a different world. They are born of a different time. So one of the things that I think is really important, this is a really critical reframe, is to say, this isn't about saying, to hell with you. This isn't about rebellion. Okay, because that's the way it always got framed to us that, ooh, you know, there's a defiance to it. And I would love for your listeners to say, this is not about defiance. This is just about backing myself. This is not to hell with you. This is yay me. So I am not setting out to tell you that what you want is wrong or that what you expected is wrong. What I'm telling you is that potentially it's no longer relevant because the world has changed so drastically. And by the way, I am a unique human in this world. And so I'm going to go and explore on my own. And if your network happens to have opinions that are born out of relevant data, so if they know something relevant to the choices that you want to make that might inform your choices, of course, listen to that. Of course, take that. I'm not suggesting you zone everybody out. But once you realize that they are just another data point for you, along with your own data point, which is just as critical as theirs, you start to go, okay, all right. I'm able, perhaps more than I've ever even allowed myself to consider, to make choices that feel relevant to now, relevant for me. Um, and guess what? You're probably going to have to, because the world is changing so quickly that if their approval is a requirement for you to act, then you're probably going to be stuck in place for a very long time. And my work previously with middle-aged people is littered with people who spent their whole lives outsourcing their desire to everybody around them until they woke up at 45 and said, I am so tired of fulfilling everybody else's needs and wants and expectations and never honoring my own. But if you think it's hard at 26, try doing it at 46. It
Yeah.
doesn't get easier. So start now
No.
building out that capability because you're going to want it in 20 years' time.
Amazing. Thank you, Jillian, for this, I hope this, if you who are listening, if if you kind of got distracted in the last few seconds, rewind and listen to this again. So it's really, really important, yes, to start today, and to if you after listening to this conversation feel, it does feel like I'm on this treadmill and that I haven't been taking decisions for now 6 months or a year. If you have this inkling, change it now, change it today with those small things that Jillian, yeah, amazing. Jillian, it feels like a great moment to kind of end the conversation, but I don't want to really end it before asking you to share to the audience where they can find, the 10 permissions, the book, or whatever else you have out there. You talked about a community. Where can people reach out to you and find out about your work?
So the book is currently available on pre-order on Amazon. And I encourage people to go and pre-order, please, to feed the Amazon beast. It will be available for sale on the 16th of September in the US at bookstores and online, so they can get it for sale then. My website, 10permissions.com, has more information about the book. It has ways to sign up for the community. It's a growing community. I'm super excited about it. It's kind of got everybody, again, from, I'll use my 26-year-olds to 56-year-olds, and even a 16-year-old, who are all, trying to intentionally navigate life, who are saying, I'm looking at my path forward and I'm realizing that I need and want to potentially do it differently. How do I do that? So I'm excited about how that's growing, but and also to reach out to me. I'm very happy to engage with people and hear from them how some of this is landing, and have a conversation. So yeah, my website's a great place to start.
Excellent. Great. So I will put all those links in the show notes.
Right.
To Amazon, to the website, and then people can then reach out to you there. Jillian, this has been a great conversation. I'm so happy that we connected and that we got to have this hour to talk, because I don't know, you said, oh, you've read my book, right? And also I was listening to you and I was thinking, oh, you've listened to the podcast. Because there's so much overlap between the reflections that you've had and you've kind of, distilled into this book. There's so much that resonates with what I've been now for 6 years trying to share with the audience about the urgency of starting now, the urgency of putting your eggs in more than just one basket, and especially also being part of a little wider community, knowing people outside, having relationships and meaningful relationships outside of just your supervisor student relationship. And you were talking, and it was just very, very satisfying for me to hear it in other words, in your words, but that the message was kind of the same. I'm personally, this was a great conversation for me, so I'm really, really thankful.
Oh,
Thank you.
and for me too. I love it. I also heard some of my own thoughts reflected in different words. So that's great, and I think it's wonderful, the resource that you're offering to your listeners, and the advice that you're giving is just so useful for everyone, and particularly now. So thank you for allowing me the space to share some of my own thoughts.
My pleasure.